to you about government and how it works, and about Richmond and its rich history. He is a district coordinator, correct? Is that your title?
Yes.
For John Joya, for the Contra Costa Board of Supervisors. And he once sat in your seat because he's a J School graduate, class of 2011, and was a reporter at the Contra Costa Times, which is now the East Bay Times, right?
Yes.
And Robert taught this class as well in 2014, when that Richmond Confidential made national news by covering an election that was dominated by Chevron money, and Chevron ended up losing. So Chevron backed all these local candidates. Their candidates lost. Richmond Confidential was writing a lot about it. They gained national attention. They were interviewed by the legendary Bill Moyers. Rachel Maddow brought them up on her show and got a lot of attention. And you're also one of the original founders of Richmond Confidential. Is that?
I like that. I've always had a soft spot for pioneers, but you know, I was part of the initial cohort that launched this wonderful website. Yes.
So there's a lot of history wrapped up in Robert, and I'll let you take it from there.
Thank you so much, Christine. That was very gracious of you. Really appreciate that intro. And just to get a quick idea on time, we're going. Is it 1 hour?
Yeah, I was saying till 11:45.
Gotcha. So I'll take less than 1 hour, and we'll have ample time for Q&A. We'll volley some back and forth, right? So I'm really, really happy to be here. It's a privilege to come and chat with you guys today. I love this school. I love this institution. When Christine invites me back, I'm always happy to come and share and help you make a real impact during this semester, because that's what it's about. This being a really impactful semester that's memorable, indelible, and brings your skills up to snuff, but also has something that you look back on and you're proud of. You made this community better in the work that you did, you have done. And that's an opportunity we have now that we didn't really have much say social media, at least web-based publishing, where this kind of class occurred all the time, but everyone's work was just for the eyes of the professor or for their cohort or so forth. I'm going to start with a little story. It was 2009. It was 15 years ago. I can't believe it. Time goes by. Savor it every moment. I was sitting right here in these chairs. We had what we called the multimedia boot camp. Do we still have that? Yes. Oh, isn't that fun, right? The difference is you guys have great tools. Right? We were working with like pickaxes and all that. So we have these big clunky recorders, and we're learning how to use them. And it's go out to the community, and we're going to do a feature story. Everybody's going to do one, and we're going to bring it back. We're going to watch it to showcase the family, the friends. It's going to be terrific, right? Me and my team, my little team of 2 other people, we went, and our assignment was to do a business profile about a great restaurant in the business district on 23rd Street, right? So if you guys know the area very well, 23rd Street, great Latino food, particularly up and down. It was called the 23rd Street Merchants Association. We go there, we go to a restaurant, it's called Pepito's. It's at 23rd, I believe, in Garvin. It's on the west side of the street. We go in there, and the assignment is clear. We're going to do a story about this beloved local institution and the great fare that they provide the community. We're in there, we're doing interviews. We're out back, we're in that courtyard area where people are eating. It's wonderful, it's lunchtime. We're doing an interview. All of a sudden, right? Forgive the ridiculous sound, but automatic weapon fire all around. Don't know where it is. Totally shocking, had no idea. Really a scary moment, right? What do? We all hit the deck, obviously, right? That's us and the patrons there. What's next? Suddenly, the sound stops. We actually hear the peeling away of the car. We actually run out front right away. I look at my team member, I say, let's go find out what's going on, right? First lesson, don't do that. Make sure that you're in a safe space before you go. So we run out there with youthful exuberance and reckless disregard for life, and we go out there, and right away, the acrid smell of both the gunpowder and the rubber is apparent. People are screaming around, running around. Thank goodness no one was hit. This was someone who drove by, sort of sprayed the area across the street for whatever reason. I might get back to that later. And they peeled off. We found the shell cases all over the ground. Obviously, we were able to give everybody a minor heart attack that Friday when we gave the showcase. Look what we saw, right? The school doesn't love me telling that story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. It happened. It was a really wild time, obviously emblazoned on the memory and conscience. That was 2009. That was 15 years ago. It was in the middle of a spate of crime that was pretty terrifying in the city of Richmond. A lot has changed since then. I'm not saying the city's perfect or things are so much better, but the numbers are what they are. And the people who are really freaked out about crime and chaos today, the data suggests that that was a whole different ballgame back then. And even more so before that. Right? A perfect example of perception overwhelming reality and calling upon trusted news sources, objective news gatherers to provide the kind of information that counter narratives that oftentimes prove false. One lesson that I do learn from that, though, other than protect your personal safety, don't jump to conclusions, would be a lot of times the best stories that you ever come across when you're in journalism are the ones you're not looking for, right? It's important to have a project. It's important to be going in a certain direction, have an idea. I get that. We want that. But never close your eyes or your consciousness to the perspective of another story that might come up. Ever heard that phrase, life happens when you're making other plans? Sometimes your best stories happen while you're beating down the door on the other one. But you're not going to see that if you're not open-minded, if you're not ready to always be there. As a journalist in the community, you always want to be aware of what's coming up and what you might be able to pivot to. Because again, it's much more likely that your best story is not one that you cooked up in your mind while you're sitting somewhere far away from where the story is. Meet people. Talk to people. Be out there. Be present. Look at the social media. Look at the documents. Do those things too. But get out there and feel it. And be open to it. Now, what I want to do is I'll give it a little bit of brief bio info, and then I want to talk about governments, and then I want to talk about story hunting, and then I want to wrap up with another story as well. Just a little bit on the bio. I would say, yes, today I work at Contra Costa County Supervisor John Joy's office. I work for the Board of Supervisors, Contra Costa County. I'll talk about that in a little more detail as well. I'm a storyteller. I know that you guys are too. That's what this is all about. The reason I am here today is because when I was 5 or 6 years old, I could spend a whole afternoon digging through my dad's dusty magazine crates and reading stories. That's what brought me here. That's what brought me to this school. That's what brought me to various careers that I've had. And it's what drives me today in government as well, which is interesting. So, out of college, my first job was the San Bernardino County Sun. It was terrific. It was the mid to late 2000s. I guess you call that the aughts. I'm not sure. It was a great time, a wild time. I covered crime in San Bernardino, and it was also a place where there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of real social challenges and issues that created something that was very serious. Yes. Pardon?
I'm from Montana.
Oh, terrific! I live in Fontana. I lived off of 4th Street.
Okay.
Terrific, right there off of the south of Baseline. Anyway, Fontana in the house, thank you. And so, after that, it was my dream to come to Berkeley, and I did. People thought I was crazy. Why would you be giving up a job, a career, going in a trajectory that you were going, you're going to be editor, all this other stuff? I said, no, I really want to go to Berkeley, and I know I won't have a chance at this again if I don't. I came here, I was 30 years old. And it was terrific, and it was one of the formative experiences of my life. Helping me one of the founder of Richmond Confidential, Bill Drummond is one of my mentors, and many others. This school became, embossed on who I am, and it's just a tremendous place. And the 3 years here that I had 2, and then 1 more as a fellow, were just incredible. And then, of course, to come back as the instructor for this course in 2014, very, very grateful, very thankful. After that, I worked at the Contra Costa Times for several years. And at that time, we had a location down in Richmond. And it was in Marina Bay. And I covered the petroleum industry in the area, which is quite large, as you guys might know. The Delta, the natural assets of the Delta have led to infrastructure that's built all around there that still persists today. Of course, it'll change and evolve and probably reduce in size over time, but that infrastructure exists still today. And then in 2015, I got a call from a politician who I covered a lot, and I respected quite a bit. And he said, "I'd like you to come and work for the public. I'd like you to come and work for me." Now, at that time, as a journalist, a lot of us come up, I know much more so probably in the past, we came up with a very adversarial sort of stance toward government or whatever. And I still have that. And it is true that if just about any other politician, local politician in the area, had called me and made that same phone call, I would have just said, "No, thank you," and that would have been the end of it, right? But this one was County Supervisor John Joya, someone who I'd worked with a lot on a lot of stories, and I developed a sense of respect for. Of course, as journalists, we always don't want to get too close to our source, right? We know that the readers and the truth are the true masters of what we should be doing, but that doesn't mean that you can't recognize that you seem to be dealing with someone who's honest all the time. You seem to be dealing with someone who tends to be working for the public good. You seem to be unable to find some of those other considerations or those lapses in judgment that you might find other places. And so I thought about it for a long time, and ultimately I said yes. And it's been terrific. I've been there now for 9 years, and there's a reason that this works. And this is a relation to you, well, I believe. There's a reason why it works. Because I remember when I first started, one of my friends and mentors, Dan Bornstein, who writes the editorials for all the East Bay papers, he's a tremendous person, high integrity, high intellect. And he said, "Well, I'm happy for you. I'm sad to lose you. I want you to be here. I'm happy for you, but I'm a little concerned. This is either going to go really well or it's going to go really bad." And what he was thinking by the way, is he knew it was deep in my bones that I'm a storyteller, that I'm a content producer. We would say today, right? He knows those things. And he knew that I wouldn't be able to just subvert that while I was, walking around being Johnny Government or whatever, right? What he couldn't have realized, and what I didn't either, was I was stepping into this role at a time when the landscape of digital technologies and tools and communications tools and the way in which all institutions use them was changing tremendously. And it would afford me an opportunity to be able to do what I'm truly passionate about. And that's what I do. Now, I understand as a journalist, I would be kind of cynical to hear this as well. Oh, well, now you're sort of telling stories that are beholden to a certain interest. Well, there is some truth to that. The way that I tell stories now is not the same way that I told them when I was a journalist. Now, when I was a journalist, one of my favorite phrases was, "Let the truth be told, though the heavens may fall," right? And I butchered that. It was someone else who said it. But the point is, truth is the goal here, and all else falls in consideration, right? I read the old stories of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and what did I take from that? It was, well, the journalists should have been reporting what they weren't reporting, and maybe the situation would have been resolved sooner. Had journalists not protected JFK on the Bay of Pigs invasion, maybe this wouldn't have happened, right? So I internalized that philosophy. The truth must be told, though the heavens may fall. Now, that said, you as journalists, your editors, there's more nuance to that, right? We always have to think the truth is not the only goal, right? Who does this hurt? Could this potentially hurt someone who is vulnerable or is unable to defend themselves? Children, anonymity. As we can see, there are obviously nuances all around this. Now, in government, I use digital technologies to tell stories all the time. Now, why do I do it? It's a different way. It's a different goal. The goal now is public awareness of engagement and awareness of resources that might be available. Also, thought leadership, culture leadership, right? Our leaders are elected and we expect them to demonstrate, to comport themselves in a certain way. And of course, we've seen that change in recent decades, where there's a lot of behavior by elected officials, by people in authority, that aren't nearly the same as they used to be a long time ago. And we can argue or debate what that has meant to our society. I think that it has numerous implications, obviously. But here at this county supervisor's office, we believe it's super important to demonstrate the best for our community. We want to be like Lincoln and appeal to better angels. We want to tell people why it's important to invest in all public health systems. We want to tell people why it's super important that we just expanded a policy to allow the undocumented to be able to get free medical services in our county, unlike so many others. We want to say that's important, and this is how we're going to, and of course, when COVID was striking, we wanted to be out front all the time on that. So, awareness, engagement, thought leadership, resource dispersal, letting people know breaking news information. I do all that stuff vis-a-vis the various platforms and channels that we're so fortunate to have at the supervisor's office. That allows me to be a journalist, and I tell that to you only because your futures as journalists look a little different than the journalists of yesteryear, right? It's a little less conventional. Every institution needs to tell its story now. Every institution needs to have a narrative in a space. And people are hiring extremely talented individuals, storytellers, to do that work. Whether it's nonprofits, whether it's NGOs, whether it's corporations, whether it's governments, whether it's for-profit businesses, whether it's academic institutions, the list goes on forever, right? And media is a big part of that as well. Now, what does the media landscape look like in the future? Well, hopefully we'll get into that as well. But for now, I want to go into local government and its structures. But I wanted to just do that preface to say that what our future is as storytellers in the media is something that's, you could look at it as unknown, unsaid, scary. I look at it as exciting. I look at it as these tools are so rapidly evolving. And in addition, with AI tools and with this general, the general denigration of truth and honest storytelling in our society, I think the niche is opening up wider than ever. I think people are hungry for the work that you're doing. That's in this community, and that's going to be globally, and I think that's not going to change. I think as the forces of disinformation continue to increase, and they will, in sophistication, strength, and reach, the need for the antidote, the professional news gatherer and storyteller, unbiased and unbeholden to whatever other institution, is going to be more important than ever. And I think that we're going to see a lot. You see at the government level, there are many bills about how to provide incentives, tax resources, and so forth to help sustain a new model. Because we know the old model is gone. The question is, what does the new model look like? Now, let's do an abrupt shift gears. Let's talk about governance. So, let's start with a little bit of feedback. When I say government in California, what pops into your mind? Let's go.
Negligence.
Okay, go.
Negligence.
Negligence. Excellent.
Corruption.
Excellent. And by the way, it doesn't have to be, these are great adjectives, right? We can also say something, you said nouns too, right? Like, my city hall or something like that. Go ahead.
Underfunded.
Got it.
Gavin Newsom.
Yep.
Performative.
Yep.
Homeless.
Pardon?
Homeless.
Homeless, yeah, good. That's a creative thinking, I like that.
Schwarzenegger.
Sure, yeah. Sure, yeah. First time I met, or not the first time, the last time I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger was here in Richmond. He came to the Ford building where there was a sun power facility. He came there, it was a great energy thing. At that time, get this, that was 2011. No one, I was working in Richmond originally, no one could find out when the last time a governor came to Richmond. Since then, Gavin Newsom's been here like at least 6 to 8 times just in the last 5 years. Coming all the time. So it's nice to be on the radar, I suppose. So more government. How about those kind of normative, negative adjectives. Excellent. I really appreciate that. I know that's important. And that is obviously consistent with the zeitgeist that's out there, right? Go ahead.
There's an organization for everything.
Yeah, there you go. Excellent point. You're ahead of me. I love that. Others. Government. Okay, give me some government structures. What is a government? The city. Laws.
A social contract between those governing and those governing.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good.
Policy makers.
Yep.
Elections.
Yep. Oh, it is, yeah. Hugely important. Now what about county government? What do you guys think? County government. This is the hard one. Mike Davis, who is like one of the really radical progressive historians. He wrote a book called Court City about LA, which is terrific. But anyway, he said like the county government is the province of all of of sort of the most venal, most terrible sloths, because it hides under the radar with all these resources. And so that's where a lot of bad things happen. County government. Let that not influence your thinking. Go ahead.
Policing.
Pardon?
Policing.
Policing?
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. What does county government do? It does some policing, that's good. What does county government do? It does, well, it's so complicated. Partially, yes.
Elections,
Yes. Yes.
management of regional services,
Well, civic services?
management of regional services,
That's right, yes, thank you.
I was gonna say, who knows?
Yeah, good.
Regulatory bodies, they regulate
Yes.
cities in their head.
Yes, so the regulatory opportunities are limited by state law. It's extremely complicated. So, how will I do this? Let's go. Let's talk about government in California. Let's do the brief overview, right? You've got the state, right? You have counties. What else do we have?
Unincorporated territory.
That would be, yes, we do, and unincorporated would be governed by whom?
The county.
That's right. What else do we have? State government. Start with the state government as the biggest state of California, then cities. Excellent, thank you. What else? Cities, counties, unincorporated as the southern counties.
Districts,
Districts, what do you mean?
different parts of the city.
Okay, that is important, and I'll talk about that in a second. Districts. So the answer to that, by the way, is some cities, right? Go ahead.
Management districts or like AC Transit Bar.
Ah, there you go. I'd call that so we'll call it special districts. And there are many. And one of the big ones is transportation districts, right? Excellent job. And what does a transportation district look like? It can be BART, it can be AC Transit, it could be a bridge authority. Think about BART. And BART is just one example. What does BART look like? Do you even have an idea of how BART works as an organizational structure? I mean, the trains are cool, right? I took it here. It's great. Oh, my bike on. It's had a terrific time. Love it. Downtown Berkeley BART station. Classic. So, the answer is, what they have is they have under the legal authority of the state, right? Everything has to fit within the state's constitution, of course, and the federal constitution. So we can't do anything that doesn't fit within that parameter. But then on the ground, these governments are basically the boss within the law, right? The most powerful person in your community is not Gavin Newsom. It's your city manager, probably, right? The city manager, by the way, who's city manager? Not even an elected person. How does that work? The city manager is like a CEO that answers to a board of elected members. That would be the city council. Right? So, but back to state special districts. BART has within state law the right to first of all, the right to collect fees from the state, and then also to levy fees for services then it owns property, then it has an elected board that governs it by district, right? And that elected board has a budget, and they have to make this system work within it. And by the way, big story, how do you think Bart's doing? Anybody know? Very poorly. And how do you think the AC Transit's doing? Even worse. Very troubling. This is technological disruption that's occurring to our defined rapid transit systems. It's very concerning. We have to work together to figure out the way forward. I'll go into it more. Special districts, transportation. What are the special districts we have?
I'm thinking departments, and maybe this isn't, but like Department of Forestry, Department of Corrections, but that might be a different.
That's a great thing. You said school districts, right? So, definitely schools is a huge one. Now, you mentioned departments, and I'm glad you did. And you said Department of Forestry and,
Department of Corrections.
gotcha, and what are those two things? It's just,
State bodies to,
well, so Department of Forestry, there's a federal one and a state one, right? And then Department of Corrections, there's definitely a state one. I think there's a federal one too, and who governs those? Those are essentially, they're large, but that's basically like the county's health department. To us, the county board of supervisors, the health department, equivalent to Governor Newsom and the legislature, the Department of Forestry, the California Department of Forestry, right? So it's a department that's not led by elected officials, that are by appointed officials that answer to the elected officials. Good? More special districts, more governments. There's governments all around us. They're everywhere. People come from different countries, especially Europeans often, and they're blown away by how much government we have. I got my ballot in the mail the other day, not my ballot, but the voter registration guide, and it was like a mini phone book, right? Got to go through that. We got a lot of democracy in America, and that's a good thing, but it also causes a lot of complexity and inefficiencies as well. Other districts.
Parks and Rec.
Well, so typically a park and rec, so this is great, I'm glad you brought that up. So a park and rec department is typically something that would be in the city, right? A city's park and rec department. Also a county's park and rec department. Also, there's a state parks department, right? Absolutely right. However, there is an opportunity for this to be like this. And that would be when people, this happens all the time, you create a special district. Why would you create a special district? You create a special district typically to manage and to provide democratic oversight of a given asset. Either that asset is tangible, like there's a piece of land, imagine, so here's a perfect example. You have a piece of land, a park, right, with trees on it, and there are houses all around it, right? And this is public property, but the government might not manage it. But now people have been building houses around it, and they want that piece of land to be a nice park for their community, right? Makes perfect sense. But the county, one of the things you learn when you go into government is just how little often of the money is what we would call unencumbered. So much. We have a $6 billion budget, and like more than 90% of it is spoken for every year, right off the bat, just to meet all of the constitutional and legal obligations of the services we have to provide. So everything else is like this little tiny bit, and that's where there's some wiggle room. So, what's the county going to say? They're going to say, we don't have that park in our jurisdiction, so how can we do it? The people around it could decide to create, under California state law, a special district. And the special district will become a contract that would provide for what? Well, number one, the funding mechanism, the most important thing. So it would say all the parcels within this radius are going to pay X number of dollars every year for the maintenance of this asset. Right? Then there might be more. Like, what are we going to do with the money? Usually what we'll do is we'll create a board to manage the money, right? And then you specify exactly how that board is arranged and so forth. So that particular method, right, that concept, that has led to whatever the number of special districts in California is, and it's a huge number. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Special districts of governments, they're everywhere. There's one in downtown Richmond. It's called the Richmond Main Street Improvement Association. All those property owners, they voted by a majority to tax themselves to create a special district to enhance downtown. So they use their money, it goes into a pool, and they have a CEO and a board who manage the utilization of those public funds to make that asset better. What about if there's others? Yes?
Water management district?
Yes, water. Excellent. Special district. You see, it's helpful to understand the Gary Hager. Yes. And sometimes not always. Like for instance, what does the county do? Well, we have a contract with a big waste management company called Republic Services, and we pay them public money to pick up everybody's trash, to do dump days, to sweep, all that stuff, right? So anything going on with that, if we have a problem, we get a complaint from the public, we go to the company and we lean on them as the big contract holder. And naturally the company is supposed to do what they can to make us happy. And if they don't, they risk losing that contract. That's ideal, right? Unideal, what happens oftentimes is you get these industries or these systems that have sort of captured that contract. And then they don't do a good job, but they just keep collecting the public's money, and the politicians or whoever else isn't managing the store very well. That's crucial. In democratic government and public administration, oversight is like everything. And that's a big part of why you're here, right? Because oftentimes the best oversight doesn't come from within the same building. It comes from a fresh perspective. So you can see, it's helpful to understand that the way that this state, this country, this civilization began, it wasn't just, okay, let's make it the best we can. No, it's been incremental the whole way. Incremental the whole way. If we could start over, we wouldn't have 1,000 special districts. We wouldn't have, a different water company for this house and across the street a different water company for that house. But that kind of thing has happened over time. And we have to work the best of what we have. Is this a government?
The university.
Is it a government?
Yes.
It is. I mean, it's provided a lot of, and not only that, it has a bunch of exempt privileges as well under the state's charter, the state's constitution. So in some ways, the University of California is not just a government, like it's a super powerful government, right? And they don't have to take orders from hardly anybody on anything. And the most famous thing would be when Governor Reagan in the late 60s tried to, shut down a protest. He had to call in the National Guard, but there was very much a sort of constitutional crisis going on there. Like, who's really in charge when these things come to a head? So, these are all these governments, and that's not even starting with the state. They're everywhere, they're huge. Now let's talk about the county government a little bit. No one here really knows what the county government does. There are 58 counties in California, and the California counties generally predated almost all the cities. Imagine this, it's sort of thinking kind of soft. What do we think? Why would that happen? When does the state incorporated? I think it's 1850, right? Right after people started streaming out here for the gold rush. Why would the counties pop up right away, and what would they do at that time? Think of the 19th century. Any ideas?
Land grab?
Yes. Recording who owns land, right? That was like the most important thing. People come out here, this is mine. This is mine. You got to have some kind of people that are producing documents that are saying who owns what, right? Also, birth and death recording, number one, right? So I think the biggest thing to say would be these counties all started as sort of administrative systems to keep recording of a new civilization that would allow for sort of the orderly transfers and generations of wealth, you could say. birth and death, marriage, various other financial records, obviously property ownership, voting, and another one's a big one. There's all kinds of people out here trying to get rich, right? In 1850. Everybody's got guns and doing all this stuff. You know, we have the records, that's cool. But sometimes people don't take too kindly to a certain piece of paper. They might react in a different way. Violence occurs once in a while. What do we do about that?
Create law enforcement.
Yeah, right. Sheriffs and jails. Gotta have that for this whole thing to work. So that creates an interesting quirk that we still have to this day. Think about cities all over the state, and the country for that matter. Cities have police chiefs, right? Are those police chiefs elected officials? It might not even be ideal for a police chief to be an elected official, would it? Right? I mean, you have the elected judges in the Deep South. You know, those are horror stories, right? Where, you know, in other words, if you're constantly worried about election, then the objective administration of justice might not always be the first thing on your mind, right? Doing what's popular might be on your mind. And sometimes popularity comes from the mob rather than from the judicious administration of justice, right? So our police chiefs in cities, they're not elected, they're appointed, they're like staff members, right? They answer to civilian oversight, elected oversight, right? What about counties? County sheriff.
Sheriffs are elected.
They are elected. Now that's a relic from the past, right? We certainly wouldn't want to do that today, I would imagine. I certainly wouldn't. But instead, we have these super powerful sheriffs who are elected by the people. And now the Board of Supervisors is like Congress. So we get to handle their purse strings within the law. But other than that, people will call my office all the time and complain about the sheriff, this, that, whatever. We have no power over what the sheriff does or doesn't do. He's elected by, in fact, the sheriff is elected by more people than we are. Right? How does that happen? Well, there are 58 counties in California. Contra Costa is one of them, as is, we're in Alameda right now. I live in Contra Costa, I work in Contra Costa. These are a couple of the big counties. There are big ones and small ones. We basically divide that by 1 million. So many of the 1 million plus, Contra Costa, the biggest of course is LA County. Interesting factoid, LA County has 5 supervisors for a county of whatever it is, 20 million people, multi-$100 billion budget, more than 100,000 employees. Does anyone know even one of the LA County supervisors? These LA County supervisors, by number of constituents and amount of money and resources at their command, they're more powerful than most Congress people in the country. More powerful than most governors in the country. They have different roles, they're not executive function, but just by those metrics. LA County is a massive state government in and of itself, right? Incredible. And nobody even knows who they are. They operate it. Fox News doesn't care about going over there and putting a camera in their face. Unless it's something that hits one of their wedge issues, I imagine. So, 58 counties, big ones, small ones, and they all have elected sheriffs. 58 counties. How are they? This is under state law. They are all broken. They're all governed by a 5-member board of supervisors. 5 members. And do you know how the 5 members are distributed among the county?
Population.
Yes, proportional population by geographic district. So like our district in West County is the smallest because it has the most people, it's the densest, right? We represent Richmond, El Cerrito, Pinole, El Sobrante, San Pablo. So we have the biggest, most diverse district, but it's the smallest in actual square mileage. The other districts there's 4 of them in Contra Costa County. So every county is governed by a 5-member board of supervisors, geographically selected, and proportional representation. So your county supervisor, John Joy, represents more than 250,000 people. And that makes him, other than the sheriff, by far the most voted for elected official in that region, right? But what does the county do? We still don't know, but the biggest one I'll tell you right now, the biggest single thing that we do is the county under state law is tasked with the administration of public and behavioral, medical and behavioral, you could just call them public health dollars and resources, right? Medi-Cal and Medicaid's administration is a county job, right? We have to do the right job for the state, which has to do the right job for the feds. The feds give the money to the state gives the money to the counties to implement the program, and that's how that feedback loop occurs. Now there are other monies, of course, as well, but that's the biggest single part of our budget, is health and human services. So that's everything from your county health plan, to Medi-Cal, to Medicaid, to WIC and other programs for the most vulnerable, homeless services, managing and running the county hospital in Martinez, all those things. That's the biggest part of what the county does. After that, everything else pales in comparison. When someone calls me from the city of Richmond and says, my neighbor, I think has an unkempt property that is, causing a vermin to occur around the neighborhood, right? Or my neighbor is parking a bunch of cars on the street illegally. Or this other person is building without permits. What am I able to do with any of those things in the city of Richmond?
Go talk to the city.
Yeah. So nothing directly. I could, presumably, just say, well, call your city hall. I could do that, but I don't. We interface with different partners all the time. But my point is, the city is in charge of those kinds of services. Public works, public safety, permitting, building, those are the province of that city within that city. Now that city does not manage the water always, sometimes there's a separate water company, and that city does not manage who's going to come out for homeless services. If someone has an encampment in the backyard, that would be us. But there's this massive interplay occurring all the time, yes?
Wouldn't another purview of counties be transportation authorities?
Yes. So Contra Costa has a transportation authority, and that now the difference is it's sort of like a housing authority. Like we have a public housing authority. So what happens with that? Man, this is so complicated when you think about it. The housing authority and the transit authority, they are provided money not from the county's general fund, but they have a specific funding mechanism. In the transportation authority, it's a certain tax on like bridge tolls and some other fees. In terms of the housing authority, most of it comes from the federal government, from Congress. And then the county, its system will administer it, and then the board of supervisors will act as its board. But that housing authority will have its own direct management, same with the transportation authority. So we have these authorities that exist adjunct to the county, but we don't have direct day-to-day enforcement of exactly what they do. But they have to comply with the various kind of state laws and so forth. So, what do counties do, however, is there are areas all over the state, all over this county, that are unincorporated, as you said earlier. Places that feel like cities, the people who live there probably, but they're not cities. They're technically in the county. And then we provide things like the public works and the permitting and the sheriff. The best way to know, I tell people, whether you live in the city or the county, is when you call 911, do you get a sheriff's deputy or do you get your local police? Now there are small cities that don't create their own police force because their economies of scale. And what they do is they contract, they hire us at the county, the sheriff's department, to provide those services. So that's a big picture piece on government. And I think what I want to leave you with on that point is what I think is really important is this idea of complexity and simplicity. And also simplicity. I don't want to tell you, I don't want to try to backdoor train you to, be nice to us, we're in government. No, I'm not doing that. But I want to keep it real. I was where you are. I love journalism. I hit it hard a whole lot of times. I was in it. I mean, my style of journalism was very confrontational. Like I wanted to expose stuff all the time, right? That was my thing. But a lot of times the thinking that I had was really inhibiting my ability to learn complexity and to do better in my work. I was always hunting for the villain, always hunting for who can I place this blame on, right? I'll give you a perfect example. Homelessness, right? Everybody sees it, everybody likes it, right? It hurts us here. We don't want this to happen. And what's the stock phrase that people have said forever about that? What's a perfect example of what you might say that I as a government official might not love when you see homelessness? What do you say?
That there's so much money the problem will be solved.
Yeah, right? It would go something like this. I know I used to say this. I would say, and it's not that it's not true. It's true on one level. What a disgrace that in the richest country in the world, we can't provide basic living accommodations for every man, woman, and child, right? Or what a disgrace that in this great country, we allow this to happen, and we have no sympathy nor resources for the most vulnerable. What an epic failure of government, right? I mean, essentially, anybody in elected office in this state, you share blame in this, right? All that's true. But where does it get us? It doesn't get us anywhere, right? What can I tell you, having now been in government, right? If we knew how to fix it, we would. If there were resources to fix it, we would. Now, people will say a budget is an expression of priorities. That's true. That's true. But that doesn't mean there's always something in the budget for everything. If we plow a whole bunch of money into homelessness tomorrow, we're taking it from somewhere else. That's number one. And then number two, that's the easy part. The hardest part of all is how to fix it. That's where nobody really knows, right? What do I mean by nobody really knows? Well, it's so simple. Nobody else. RFK Jr. I remember RFK Jr. did an Instagram thing, where he did the typical he walked. It was amazing to me because it was like it was right out of the 60s playbook, He was walking around San Francisco. Look at this. Look at these tents. This is a fail. If I get into office on day one, I'm opening up the federal HUD department. We're going to pour money into this. This is going to end tomorrow. That kind of thing. And it's just not realistic because how do you fix it? Well, let's just say that there was unlimited money and we just bought, let's say small, safe, nice housing units for all the tens of thousands of homeless people in this city. Problem solved, right? It wouldn't solve. And that's, as you get in, you start to realize just how difficult some of this is. The level of complexity. This idea of, I'll just walk around and confront every political official and say, why are you failing on homelessness? It's a fair shot. It's sort of like a debate question. But as far as great journalism, as far as understanding public policy, for figuring out a way forward, it's not going to get there. It's going to fit into the outrage ecosystem, and that's cool, I guess. It gets some clicks. But we want to be better than that. We want to do better than that. Higher understanding, integrity, complexity. We don't want to just score points. We want to know what the issue is. We want to share it. We want to improve because that kind of thinking is also part of the problem. I'll take questions on that as well. Let me just wrap with a quick summation. Well, no. Before I do that, I want to say how to find stories one more time. Number one, the best stories are often the ones you're not looking for. That doesn't mean that you don't have your own projects. That's great. Do it. Number two, just get out there. Just get out there. I don't know what that looks like to you. I know for me, I used to love it. I take my bike to BART. I get down there. I get off whether it's Del Norte, which wherever our office is. You can come there anytime, by the way. That'll be fun. Or I go to downtown Richmond, and I just start cruising. And that's how I get my assignments. And everything that I went out and did, I always found, boom, 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 a bunch of other things that I didn't know before that I just learned from being there. Get out there. Of course, the research, the social media, the documents, the city, the county websites, those are all good too. But there's no substitute for getting out there and feeling and meeting people and just being a human in space at a certain time. That's huge. How else do we want to find stories, right? Well, I think that a big thing when you're launching here, the city of Richmond is the people in these communities, they're hungry for what it is that you have. They're hungry for it. Because you can see it, not only in the loss of local news, but you can see it in the constant dissatisfaction and just general, the general malaise that you see on all those message boards. There's the Everybody Loves Richmond, or Everybody's Richmond Facebook page, which is a really great barometer of the kind of atmosphere in the community. These are people who are really engaged and reflective of things they see. Now, of course, there's access to grime, there's politicians and all that too. There's all kinds of detriments to sift through, but you'll see a lot there. Go there, check that out. But what you'll notice is people are hungry. They want objective, they want journalism that teaches them something and doesn't make them feel like they're being slicked with something else, right? That's what we want to do. And that's also part of why, look at the success of the Richmond Standard. This Chevron Corporation bought news site. Look at it. When I say the success, what do I mean by success? Well, I mean, they have a page. It looks okay. It's pretty good. Obviously, the writing and the digital technologies and the presentation is not excellent by any means. It's pretty lowbrow, but it has tons of clicks, tons of followers. And how is it getting it? Well, I've talked to directors before. I know. How do you think that they're getting most of their clicks and their followers? 2 categories generally.
Social media.
Well, social media, it helps. I guess I was talking about 2 categories of storytelling.
Good news, stuff, community.
Yes. Good news, like feature profile type stuff, right? The high school football team, the valedictorian, the kid who is a prodigy on the trumpet, whatever. That works really well for them, and crime. They always put the crime stuff up. People will always love that. So you can see that the hunger is there, but they can't provide what people really want, which is, tell us what's really going on. Because they're always asking it, and they're always getting 10 different people next door experts, right? And that's fine, that's good, that helps. But there's a space that's wide open for you. Professional news gatherers and storytellers. And Richmond is just one microcosm of an entire country, an entire world. In an era of disinformation where the question of, I don't know what to believe, is only going to become more pronounced, right? The idea of the dizzying array of information and who has the power to cut through that. That's a special place in our society. I'm big on this idea of digital literacy, right? And I think that's a role that journalism play as well. Because when you see it, it's awful. It doesn't just afflict our seniors, like some people think. It also afflicts young people. There was a study out of Stanford just a couple of years ago where they were showing Stanford students this doctored video of some voting machine in Arizona. And like 85% of them said, that's evidence of voter fraud. Right? When it was nothing the case. Right? It was an AI generated garbage news. It basically just showed voting stuff going like this, like someone wheeling it out, and then the voiceover was talking about how this is voter fraud, right, with an authoritarian voice. It signals people just believe it. So, 4 years after I'm face down on Pepitos in that gunfight, I find myself at Martinez Jail. I'm there not as a client, but as a journalist, and I go in there because I have been covering the trial of someone named Joe Blacknell. He was a kid who grew up in the neighborhood, took on the moniker Fatter, and was allegedly a mass committer of violence, right? In other words, he killed many people in drive-by shootings over a brief period of time. I watched the whole trial, and I went there, and I had my visit with him after the trial was over. He'd already been convicted guilty. He was going to be shipped to a state prison. I walk in the door and he's standing right there on the other side of the glass. And I get closer and he's got his fist up against the glass. Do I do it? Do I reciprocate? I did. I just wanted, and the reason why is we have to think of ourselves ethically. Like, this is a human being. I know he was convicted, but that doesn't mean, he probably did these things, of course. But the evidence was overwhelming. But he's a human being, and I want to talk to him. And if he wants to talk to me, that'll be great. Where's the harm in showing the solidarity if that's what he wants to do? So I did. We had a nice chat. He was very much upbeat because he was just thinking about his appeal. The idea is you don't do anything after a terrible outcome from your perspective on the conviction because your attorney is saying just give us time, we'll file appeals and so forth. So he was in that mood and he was willing to talk about, and the story that he told wasn't, of course, he didn't acknowledging the crime or anything like that, but he talked about being a kid growing up in this neighborhood. And this had come up in the trial before, I knew there was validity to it, and the death of his friend when he was like 14. 2 14-year-old boys, and one of them was senselessly killed in gunfire. And that had become like the grounding philosophy or the raison d'etre of his life. Everything for him and his cohort. They always said, keep it, they had a little mantra. They said, keep it lit for Shawnee Bow. That was their beloved fallen friend. Now, unfortunately, he was convicted of discharging this kind of energy through violence at people that he felt were in some way responsible, right? Rival crews, rival neighborhoods. That day in 2009 was right in the middle of that hot, deadly summer that he allegedly committed. Never know for sure, but I'm pretty sure it was him that day. Him and his friends were the ones shooting those weapons out there at those people. Can't know that for sure. But none of that happens. I discovered none of this had I not gone to the community in the first place. Right? Get out there. Be there. Be with people. Be open-minded. You never know through what circuitous route you're going to discover something new. Journalism is amazing. We have more tools than ever, and I'm super excited about them and where they're going. But the core of this whole enterprise still, at least of this kind of journalism, is you still have to talk to people, you still have to be out there, you still have to experience life in a way with a journalistic, professional news gathering and news distributing mindset. So, that's to say, get off the computers, get out there once in a while, and I'm super excited for what you're going to do. Richmond Confidential, every cohort, every year, people have experiences that they never forget, and the community, I mean, it doesn't matter what year it was, people will still say to this day, remember that Richmond Confidential story that one time? You'll look it up, it was 2013, or it was 2016. And what that means is that was a whole different cohort of people, a whole different set of energetic, idealistic, super intelligent Berkeley grad students were out there doing their thing that year in a way that made a difference forever in that community. So go forth, be great. Let's take some questions. Go ahead.
So how would you recommend, having been a journalist and working in government now, that we approach county governments to get answers to questions that we might have?
Excellent. So, the best way, number one, you have to think about it in context, right? And by the way, thanks for bringing that up because I gave that short shrift, Christine, this point. We're going to get into it now. It depends on context, number one, right? If you're working for, I don't know, let's say you're working for the top education journal in Washington, and they send you out here for a week to get the story about what's going on with the crisis in West Country Unified School District, right? If that's the context, you got to play it differently, right? You got to be more direct. You got to come straight in. right? You gotta say, I'm here with this story, this is what I'm hunting for, and I'm gonna need to talk, we have an interview, obviously be pleasant, but you wanna get your interviews, you wanna do all that, it's very direct. You need to parachute in and parachute out, and that doesn't leave a lot of time for niceties. But I will tell you, absolutely, this is something that I learned way too late. I started off, I was young and I was full of fire, and I had this attitude all the time of like, we need to talk. Right? I'm a journalist and we're talking, right? And so I probably put a lot of people off that way, right? And what happens when you do that? A huge part, you have to balance this. You have to balance our ethics and our mission and our drive and our resolve. We have to balance those things with getting things done. Because a huge part of this job, what I never realized early on, a huge part of this job is just getting people to do what you want them to do. Right? And I never thought of it that way. Like, how do I nicely induce people to do stuff? If you do that, your job's gonna be easier, your journalism's gonna be better. As long as you don't get captured by the system, like you're all hanging out and being buddies and whatnot. But bottom line is, when you come at me with something, I need this now. Like, the reality is, any government official, they're not going to just like slide their desks across and say, I'm going to work for this journalist meeting as fast as I can. They're not going to all be all hands on deck. That's the way I used to think they would. They could back burner that if they want. You have to call them back again. What are you going to do in the end? Of course, they look bad if they decline to comment. Obviously, there are laws about public records requests, but they can slow walk all those things. Don't induce the slow walk if you don't have to. Right? So, now, the answer to your question direct, what do you do this semester to get in touch with the right government officials to give you the stuff that you need for the stories that will help people understand what's going on? Well, emails are always good, right? Start with the email oftentimes. What I like to do is start with the email and follow with the phone call. So you start with the email, and it's gotta be nice, you gotta take time for the salutations, and then I'm doing a story, and it's better always to be, if you can, to be open-ended early on. If you give the signal, I'm here for a hatchet job, right? I'm here because I need to take this down. Like, you guys are blowing it on homelessness, and I'm gonna rake you over the coals a little bit. Well, that's the signal a lot of people give a lot of times, and what's gonna happen? You're gonna get the minimum amount of cooperation. So it's better to come in open-ended. I'd like to use words like, I'd like to understand, can you please teach me about, is there somewhere that you can direct me where I can provide resources that will explain? Those kinds of nice things, right? So, welcome, salutations, and of course, use your organization, the patina of strength, solidarity, integrity. Richmond Confidential has a great name in this town. Thanks to Christine, thanks to so many others, right? And thanks to this institution. So you always bring that up right away. When you say, I'm with Richmond Confidential, I want to do this story, what do they think? I can tell you what they think. I'm going to get so get in their heads. They're thinking, this is an intelligent young person who is going to be a professional and they're not looking to do something really, because people around here are on edge. Because there's a lot of next door journalists that all they care about is, so-and-so was murdering cats again this weekend, the homeless shelter, that kind of, or the cat shelter. So you want to come at people with this pleasant and professional bearing, open-minded, open-ended, let people know where you're going, no subterfuge, right? Then, if they respond to the email right away, terrific. If not, follow out with the phone calls. The phone call is always great. Everybody's a little bit keyed up when they get the phone call. They don't like it. They're working on this. They get constituent calls all day. They get the phone, and they're often not in a great mood, right? You call them and you say, I'm a journalist. I'm going to need you to be working for me a lot this afternoon because I need this. That's the attitude, But you call and you say, hey, I'm so-and-so. It's always encouraged over away. And then I'm just following up on the email I sent before. And what you're going to usually get from them is they're going to say, oh, okay, what's your name? And they're going to start searching. And, oh, here's your email right here. Thank you very much, right? That's the way to start. That's the best way. Email, follow with a phone call. Now, if you're there, much better. Go to City Hall. Go talk to people, right? Talk, especially, another tip, electeds are better bureaucrats initially, right? Bureaucrats, by that I just mean people who work for the city or the county, who aren't elected by people, they have a job, they have a career. Public works engineer, right? Systems administrator, whatever. They, oftentimes, if you come at them as journalists, they're going to say, help, public information officer, take this. You know, I don't want to talk to these people, right? The elected official will always be much more easy to talk to right away. But those bureaucrats will talk to you soon if you demonstrate, capacity, professionalism, kindness, whatever. Questions? Yes.
I'm an international student,
Yes.
and it's a new experience for me to understand the whole structure of the government here. So I'm working on like public safety beat, and I'm trying to kind of retrieve reports from the courts. But I'm not sure about how the court system works. So is it like county level, or is it towards the cities? Because in Kenya, it's more like the state, then the districts are the bigger ones, and cities is inside the district. So it's like the districts just does have courts, and then there's like a higher level court in the state and all of that.
Yeah.
So can you just
Super complicated on the courts thing. I will just say that, of course, there are state courts, right? Now, the courts that you want to go to here typically are the Superior Court that's in Martinez, right? Now, how is that governed? Well, it's sort of like a hybrid system where the county has jurisdiction, and I think we have the property, okay? The judges are appointed by the state, and I actually don't know for certain whether we or the state pay their salaries, the judges and so forth. Of course, the bailiffs, they're the sheriff, they're county employees. So it's very much a hybrid system. And then, of course, since it's the administration of justice, it's different than all the other systems in terms of like, we definitely cannot, it's against the law for us to tell judges or lawyers or anybody else to give us this document, this, that, or whatever. So, for data, for public safety data, you're going to go to the police department, of course. You're also going to go to the county sheriff, of course. They're going to have data on crime rates and so forth. What the court will have is like conviction and case data. So if you want to know like who this person is, what they've been convicted of in a court of law, you have to go to them, and it is going to be it's not going to be a one-day turnaround. You've got to initiate the process. Yeah. Now they do have a website. I don't know how helpful it'll be without a case number. They do have staff for people who will help you get case numbers. In the old days, 15 years ago, I used to go there because I did a lot of stories on cases, and they had a records room where you would go there and they would bring the records to you and you would inspect them, take pictures, and then give it back. But I was like, can you access all of that from your computer today? I think you might, but I don't know for sure.
The district attorney's office.
Oh, great, yes.
Isn't that a county office?
Yes. So the DA is another perfect example, right? A county office, another perfect example of a relic from the past. Cities have police chiefs and city attorneys. Are they elected? Well, Oakland's an exception, they do. But most cities do not, right? Those are staff positions. In the county, we have elected chief as well as elected district attorney. So the DA is elected by the people, by a lot of people, countywide. And they are the administrator of justice. They're following a lot. There's various defined restrictions of what they can and can't do. But they and their staff are paid through the county general fund. Well, we can't tell the DA what to do. We can limit their budget if we wanted to, but there's certainly no appetite for that on the board. Yes.
How, at the county level, do you start to think through and reconcile differences between how things are managed at the city level? And I mean this in the context of talking about policing specifically. I actually have the privilege of working with Bill Drummond, and I'm helping teach a course that you just directed us to Chief French the other week to come in this week, who was fantastic, by the way.
Good.
But especially for that conversation, it's so apparent that the policing structure in Richmond is significantly different than, say, San Paulo, say, just any other kind of given city. And they know this, and they don't talk to each other, as kind of said by Chief French. Does the county facilitate any sort of conversation between police forces? I know that you mentioned the sheriff structure, or is that also sort of something that you guys are kept in the dark about?
Well, so the answer is yes, we can. There's no formal agreement or obligation that we must. The city's police department is governed by the city of Richmond and the laws of California and the Constitution of the United States. Right? Period. They can do what they want within those strictures. The police chief, Chief French, is serving at the pleasure of the city manager. The city manager serves at the pleasure of the city council. That's how that command structure works, that chain works. The budget for the city of Richmond comes from the budget for the police department for the city of Richmond. Of course, the city of Richmond can apply for, and they do, all kinds of grants and other things to get funding from federal and state sources in the administration of public safety. Now, could tomorrow County Supervisor Joya say, I'm concerned about all of the disparate ways of policing in West County, and we need to all get in a room and figure out something that's going to be better for our communities and more cohesive? Sure, people might hate that. There might be leadership. Right? That's one of the beauties in this country, or from journalism's perspective, I think, as well as and certainly from my perspective, elected officials can pretty much do whatever they want as long as it's within the law. Now that's why, of course, the norms of what they do have changed in recent decades, and that is the cases that I mentioned before. But we can do anything we want on that. And would Supervisor Joya have the capital and the cash to wrangle all the police chiefs and all the districts around? Absolutely he would. But does he feel like it's a necessary use of his time right now? I'm not speaking for him, but no, but otherwise he would, I suppose. The City of Richmond's Police Department has an incredible history. It is doing well right now by a number of metrics. When I say incredible history, you can find the 60 Minutes piece in the early 80s. It's amazing. But this is a department that even 15 years ago, when I first came to town, had a very terrible reputation for violence and racism and, frankly, white supremacy within the department. And that has, to my eye, been rooted out pretty well. And the department is very much held in generally high esteem in the city. Certainly, as an institution, the police department is in a higher esteem than most other institutions in the city right now. But to answer your question, is there a force that can create some kind of collaboration between these different departments? No. But do elected officials say yes to these things all the time? Absolutely. I mean, there is a tremendous amount, for the most part, of professional regard among, that's what I see, among various differences. When I call the city of Richmond, I get every courtesy extended, of course. And the same when they call us and so forth. So when I have a constituent who calls me, who needs help, I take them right to the city, via phone or email. I take them right to my contacts. We call it a warm handoff, right? They tell that in nonprofits as well. Hi, this is the issue, this is the person, please help them as well as you can. And they do. So there's a lot of collaboration. The answer is yes. But as far as initiating a task force or a joint project to do that, there has been no impulse for that. But if there is, then we'd certainly be all ears.
Thank you. Okay, Robert, let's make this the last question.
So yeah, I would like to know to what extent cities and counties are dependent to city government, because I'm starting on Chevron, and we all know that Chevron just granted $550 million to the city of Richmond, and to me this is such a sum of money. So I want to know, if there will be direction from the state or county government where it's up to the city solely to be responsible for those funds.
So the answer is not a lot. It's really amazing, right? When you think about how decentralized our systems are, our federalist systems, right? The way different governments are able to act. This has been, of course, there are efficiency concerns, but in my mind, this might be the most genius thing of all time in terms of public administration. By creating all knitted together by some common law, but at the same time autonomous to do things all over the country differently. It's really quite astounding how effective this model has become. And so the answer is, the governor and his staff literally never come to the county board of supervisors and say, you need to do this, this, and this. And similarly with the state. Now, it is true that the state could pass a new law, and we as county and city would comply with those laws. That's absolutely true. But if literally the governor could come down, and if he said, you have to do this, well, we probably would. We probably would have worked together if within reason. But he has no legal authority to do it, right? That's amazing. But there is something. Your question was, how dependent are local governments on state and federal governments? Well, they're tremendously dependent on them because of the money, right? The federal government has a tremendous amount of money, and they spend it their way. But when they want to spend it domestically, what does the federal government do with its money? Does it send down a team of federal government agents to go do a program? No. I mean, they have FBI offices, obviously, right? But no, they give the money to the state, called block grants, and they say, they give them a broad parameter, do these things. And then the state gives the county. Most of our health budget comes from the state, right? And we are there, we have to implement this. Now, if we're not doing it right, the state is going to conduct an audit, and then they're going to threaten the withdrawal of funds if these new conditions aren't met. That's what usually happens. That's basically the model. You see it in schools, you see it on campuses, you see it in other governments. State or federal officials will come in and they will say, we've heard that things are going wrong here in whatever way. It has to be legal. And we're gonna investigate it, audit it, and if that's the case, then we're gonna take the money away. Happened to a City of Richmond Housing Authority lost their housing authority money, and now we manage it. Because the federal government came in and determined that there was all kinds of graft and waste, right? This is decades ago. So the answer to how dependent is very dependent structurally, but not dependent at all on a daily management basis. I think that the biggest takeaway that I want to offer you guys today is all the problems that you encounter are enormously complex. And if you start from that, I know that's like a cop-out, but if you start from that, the learning that you'll do and the information you'll glean and you'll gather will be much richer and much better than if you start from the problem X is awful, institution Y is in charge, they're responsible and they need to answer for this, right? Go in with an open mind, figure it out. What you'll realize is there are not just a bunch of really smart Wizard of Oz's behind curtains who know the answers to everything. There's just humans, there's just us. And we're trying to get it right too. We have resources, we have some legal authority, that's great. But the idea that the government needs to solve this or that, it's so much more complicated than that. And that doesn't even go to say another big thing to keep in mind is a tremendous amount of money that the federal government spends, or the state or county governments spend locally. It's not like it's even with our staff. The whole model now is how you use resources with community-based organizations, nonprofits, to provide the services. They do whatever, but that emphasizes the oversight model. So, it's super complicated. Go in and learn. And if that's step one, then what will come out at the end of your semester here will be much better, I promise you. It'll be much stronger, you'll be much more proud of it. You'll have a firmer command on the reality that's out there. I'm learning too. There is no single answer. There is no magic bullet. The universe is indifferent to some degree. And it's your job to help figure it out and be a citizen. So thank you.